everybody, it's me, Kristen, again, with another fireside non-fire chat. And I thought about my last video where I was talking about mental illness, and I wanted to really say that despite acute episodes that people may have, mental illness is chronic. And I think that's an important thing to realize. Thought I'd bring out my little whiteboard, write a few things down here. So let's talk about this. So let's talk about the supports that people need when they have a mental illness. They need stable housing, obviously, money, meds, food and drink. Everybody needs to eat and drink. Transportation to get to those appointments. A good care team, a good doctor, a good therapist. It's difficult to deal with mental illness if you don't have the proper support team. And it is really a team. People need a primary care doctor. They need a psychiatrist. They need a therapist at minimum. 3 different doctors minimum. And a lot of people, if they have substance use disorders, they need, different things. And if they have other chronic conditions, they need, those doctors. Like if you're female, you probably need a gynecologist at some point. That's part of your care team. And you also need social support, because you can't go it alone, but a lot of people try to go it alone, or their family tries to go it alone, because a lot of friends and family, they disappear when people have mental illnesses. So while we're talking about supports needed, we need to talk about health insurance. In the United States, it is not an easy thing to keep and have. It's a little bit easier for some people because pre-existing conditions got rid of, but they could put them back. I don't know. And now you can buy health insurance off the marketplace, but it's still extremely expensive. And besides paying the premiums for health insurance, you often have co-pays for doctor visits and for medications. And also, a lot of times the doctors you want might not be within the system of the healthcare insurance that's going to pay for your stuff. So a lot of doctors are like, oh, I don't want to take Medicare because they don't pay me enough. So they just won't even take Medicare patients. Or Medicaid patients. So even if it's a supplemental Med Advantage plan, they're like, nope, not gonna do it. So you can't even get care sometimes. And then, well, what if you're living on with Medicaid and Medicare? These for the most part, they're not livable. It's not an amount of money that's livable that you can live on. $1,200 a month. How can you live on that in the United States? Maybe if you live somewhere in the middle of nowhere in a studio apartment with 2 roommates, I don't know. But the average rent in most places is more than that. So how do you live if all your money is going to rent and then you have no money to live on? So this is a huge problem. We say we give people support, people have SNAP benefits, Medicare, Medicaid, blah, blah, blah. But the truth is that people can't live on these things. And if you're disabled in some way and can't work for whatever reason, what do you do? How do you not end up homeless? So here I'm going to propose 2 very outlandish ideas to help the situation: universal health care and universal basic income. Now, a lot of people rail against these ideas as communist and too expensive, blah blah blah. Well, I don't want to hear it. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, but we need change in this country, and these two things would actually help quite a lot. We have the money in the United States to do this. If we stopped spending billions and trillions of dollars on the military, divert some of that money to universal health care and universal basic income. It's problem solved. No. I mean, it wouldn't solve all the problems, but it would lift up a lot of people. So this is an overly simplistic diagram, obviously. But if we want to talk about universal basic income and universal health care, the thing is that when people have money, especially people in the lower income range, they spend it and they put it back into the economy. Like, most of the people who are very wealthy do not spend a lot of their money, so their money doesn't go back into the economy. But people spend their money when they're in the lower income range, and most of that money goes right back into the economy, and it boosts the economy. So if you give people a universal basic income, what are they going to spend it on? They're going to spend it on rent, food, some going out to eat once in a while, clothes, basic necessities, transportation. They're going to spend it on, if we have universal health care, they wouldn't need to necessarily spend it on paying for medications, paying for hospital stays, paying for co-pays for doctors, paying for whatever else, So the idea that like for universal basic income, if people are given money, it just like goes down the drain is nonsense. That's not how it happens. People are given money and they put it back into the economy. So it's a win-win. So as a society, I think we have to ask ourselves, do we want people dying in the streets? Apparently, the answer to that question is yes right now. A lot of us don't, but apparently a lot of people have no problem with it, because so many people fight against things that would make a difference to the poorest in the country. And not everyone with a mental illness is poor, of course, but if you can't work because of mental illness, it makes it difficult to make a living wage. It makes it difficult to pull yourself out of poverty if you cannot work. So we need to ask ourselves, really, do we want people dying in the streets? Why do we want that? Is it like a priority for our country to like pull yourself up by your bootstraps? And it's a absurd notion. You can't pull yourself up by your bootstraps. We just need really to think about, why we let people die in the streets. Like, individually, we can't save everybody. Like, I can't go and like give everybody money every day because it's not feasible. But as a collective, in a country, we have enough resources, if we steered them in the right direction, to help people, at least more people than we are helping now. And I don't think the answer is wellness farms, institutionalization, jailing people who are mentally ill, and I mean, the whole jail system is another topic, but we have to do better if we want to see change in this society. So here's something else that if we want change, this is something you cannot do, which we are doing right now, which is completely nonsensical. You give someone a prescription, you discharge them from the hospital, and you think that they're going to get better. That's not how it's going to work. I mean, it just doesn't work like that. What if, you're discharging someone to homelessness, How are they going to find a doctor or get to an appointment or pay for medications? Even if someone has a place to live, you're expecting someone who is probably not processing to their full capacity right when they leave the hospital. You're asking them to go find a doctor, do all that mess, and like take care of their basic needs at the same time. It's a difficult process, let me just tell you this. With all the paperwork you have to fill out, and just finding a doctor who will take your insurance, who you get along with. Most people don't have the luxury of getting along with their providers, but just like finding one who takes your insurance or who has appointments. A lot of doctors these days, especially psychiatrists, because there aren't really enough of them, they're all booked up. So what do you do if you can't even get an appointment with a psychiatrist? But you have one prescription, one refill, and that's it, or something like that. How do you get another refill of your medication if you don't have a doctor? People who don't have chronic conditions or like a mental illness, they don't understand that how important the healthcare aspect is. Because like, I haven't been able to live without insurance since I've had insurance my whole life because I've needed it. And if I didn't have insurance, I wouldn't be able to get the medications that I need, and I would go crazy. So like, my life literally depends on having health insurance. So you give someone a prescription, you dump them out of the hospital. How is that going to help anybody? It doesn't. That's what we're doing right now, and it doesn't work. People need the supports, like I was talking about. And if people don't have that, we're depending on people's families to basically take up the slack. But what if people don't have a good family? What if their family doesn't believe in mental illness? What if people have to kick their family members out of the house or choose to? What if, it's a bad living situation? What if there's domestic violence going on? All these situations exist, and we just need to do better. We can't just like drop someone off with a prescription and hope they'll get better, because they're not going to get better. They're going to wind up back in the hospital. And you know what? It's way more expensive to have people doing the hospital routine over and over again, rather than to have them stabilized on medication and in proper housing. So in the end, society and everyone would save money if we just did it right. If we provided the proper supports, if we said, okay, not everyone can pull themselves up by their bootstraps, so let's make sure that we don't have people dying in the streets for no reason. Give some people money, provide a universal basic income to everybody, lift up everyone from the bottom so we're not like drowning in the sea. And then, provide some supports out there. Otherwise, it's just not going to get any better. So another question I think we have to ask ourselves as a society is, what if, instead of making life impossibly hard for everyone, we made it easier for people? What if we just cared more? And what if we directed resources in the right direction instead of expecting everyone to be the same? And we live under this idea that everybody's independent and can do everything independently. Well, let me tell you, there's nothing we can do independently anymore. We're all interdependent on each other. So why do we have to pretend like we're like living on an island alone when we're not? So what is so wrong with making life easier for people? If we can, I believe we can, and we're not. We're making it, a lot of people in power are making life way harder for people, and I don't understand why. Like, why? What is the point? We are here on this earth for such a short time. Why would we want to spend our lives making life miserable for other people? It doesn't make any sense. Okay, everybody, that's about it for now. Thanks for listening to my rant. And there are lots of things I left out. I just like a brief overview of things that I was thinking about. So thanks for listening. I'll talk to you later. Bye.